Well, America's outrage is going to continue to be the center stage in the New York courtroom today as the trustee overseeing the General Motors bankruptcy and the automaker's unsecured bondholders make their case to block the hefty paychecks for two firms handling GM's restructuring. GM, which has received $20 billion in federal loans, may end up paying Alex Partners and Evercore Group up to $130 million for their services. And the bankrupt automaker isn't skimping on advertising either, shelling out up to $50 million a month, the same amount it spent before Chapter 11. Are all of these bills outrageous? Are they necessary? What's your thought on it? Here's my take. Number one, I'm not sure precisely what these turnaround specialists are getting paid for. Did they turn around or did the U.S. government step in? Number two, should we now wonder just exactly how much Steve Ratner and Ron Boom are getting paid at the Auto Task Force? I think they're kind of wondering, they wish they weren't doing it for the government, they were doing it for themselves. Number three, even if bankruptcy lawyers and turnaround specialists in this case are making money, perhaps that's good, at least one part of the economy is making the money, is GM footing the bill or we footing the bill? And if we're footing the bill, should we ultimately decide who we choose to hire in bankruptcy protection to represent this company if we're the largest shareholder? Joining me now from Flint, Michigan is John Milne, a General Motors small bondholder, and with me here in New York, Jerry Silberman, the CEO of Corporate Turnaround and Fox Business's Chris Cotter. Good morning, guys.
Morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
All right, let's get started with Jerry. I know you guys are frustrated. $130 million for this restructuring by two firms. Is this legit?
And it may be over by the end of August or early August. It's a lot of money. Just do the math. For 2 months' work, that may be $130 million plus. You're forgetting the discretionary bonus and the success fees on top of that as well. That's a lot of money. And if you just do the math and divide by, well, they're talking about paying people $1,000 an hour, up to $1,000 an hour. That's an expert. Anyone who gets $1,000 an hour, you better be an expert at what you do. And if you do the math...
Chris, isn't an expert supposed to get you a deal with somebody other than the U.S. government?
Oh, an expert's supposed to get paid a lot of money. Jerry, here's the thing. I'll go in and do it for $400 an hour. I mean, we'll start our own consulting firm. Cotter, Glick, Lee, and McShane will go in there. $400 an hour, we'll bill... Excuse me, I'm sorry. Glick, Cotter, Lee, and McShane. I step on my toes.
You're not getting rid of me so fast.
The issue is, Jerry, that we're dealing with experts here. This is the largest bankruptcy in the history of bankruptcies. You need to make sure you do it right, so you pay a lot of money to make sure you're doing it right.
But how many experts do you need to screw in a light bulb? This is
that what it is, screwing in a light bulb?
Well, because how many experts do you need? If you have master chefs, for example. Master chefs come in, you're going to have 100 master chefs make you a dinner? Doesn't work that way. You have too many chefs in the kitchen. That's the problem. You have people here that you need some experts, but you need people to actually do the work.
Well, no, but Chris raises a good point, and that is, well, this could be one of the largest bankruptcy cases in U.S. history. It's one of the top. Mm-hmm. And if they're actually able to get out of bankruptcy in 2 months...
It's a miracle. They're miracle workers.
Right? I mean, then perhaps it is the fair shake, and they should get paid that money. John, I know you're joining us by phone. What do you make of that?
Well, you made an original point before we came on that should we have approval of this spending? Well, we do. Anything over $10 million since they first took a Treasury loan is being approved by the Treasury Department and the Auto Task Force. So we did approve this expenditure. As to Chris's point, I'm not sure you even need to pay $400 an hour to sit there, answer the phone, and do what Tim Geithner asked you to do. Because everything happening at GM right now is happening with the Treasury Department's approval.
So has this been approved or will it be approved? Because my understanding is they're going to the bankruptcy judge and they're saying, all right, this is excessive. It's up to you now. You can make the decision, yes or no on this. But has this been, if this has been approved by the Auto Task Force, then we should all be looking at the Automotive Task Force and saying, why would you ever approve this, especially the success fees?
Well, I also wonder, I read an article that mentioned one of these companies may have been involved before the bankruptcy filing.
Yep.
I would assume that had something to do with the bond exchange offer, a rousing success. So, yes, let's hire these guys again. General Motors spent something over $100 million to do a bond exchange offer that was doomed to failure from day one.
Well, you know, let's bring people up to date on a couple of things. First of all, this one of the senior executives from Alex, because we're talking about Alex and Evercore, the two companies who get paid $130 million, He is now the chief restructuring officer for General Motors, oh, by the way. And number two, as Jerry pointed out, there are success fees attached to this. The success fee for Alex is they would receive $13 million as well as a discretionary bonus. Evercore's success fee will be $17.9 million. So if we're going to tell the whole story, Jerry, the whole story here is that they're going to get really large bonuses to complete this transaction. Clearly, the Auto Task Force has to be aware of that.
I don't have a problem with the success fees. I think everyone should be accountable to some extent. If you do a really good job, get me out in 2 months, you're entitled to success fees. But then the bulk of the money is $130 million is being paid for not success fees. How much? $130 million for 2 months' work. How much could you possibly do? How many people could you hire? What are they doing? I just don't see it.
The thing
about this to Lehman, though, right? I mean, the Lehman Brothers bankruptcy process, the attorneys got paid, what, like $950 an hour, $1,000 an hour? I mean, that's what these guys get paid, right?
And there's no complaint about the attorneys just yet in this fee. It's more the consulting firms. And the point of the matter is this. These firms came in based on market value and based on charging what they could charge, maybe not the amounts that they could charge, but a success fee, and the different pieces are what they could charge in a separate bankruptcy, another company, another situation. So to me, if the Auto Task Force approved it, then they knew what they were getting into. If they weren't going to be able to charge these fees, maybe Alex, maybe Evercore would say, you know what, we're just not really interested in this right now. A month ago when this whole deal first started.
So, John, you are a GM small bond holder. I don't know. You tell me. How does this make you feel? Because you were clearly the one left out of the entire transaction.
Well, it's consistent. We've been left out at every point in this. I don't think at this point I can be too angry at General Motors. They're not making the decisions. They're not the driver here. It's all the Treasury Department. I think as a small bondholder, we could have been satisfied way back in this process. General Motors made no attempt to get the bondholders on board. I'm not familiar with any other large bankruptcies or even restructurings like this where the first thing you did wasn't get the bondholders on board. In this case, we appear to be the last consideration for them at every step of the way. I read a report early on when people were just wondering whether GM might go bankrupt, and it mentioned that they had a 355-day supply of Pontiac G6s somewhere. If they would have just offered small bondholders one of those cars as settlement on our bonds, we'd have probably taken the deal.
That's a great point. And John, I assume what gets you even more fired up, and Chris, you've been looking at the numbers, is the advertising budgets. Now, for people in the media industry, we actually want them to advertise because we're getting clobbered. Minor detail. Right. But $50 million a month, is that right?
Full disclosure on that. I have no problem with this at all. I mean, we want Look, the government has poured, what, $80 billion into the automotive industry? We obviously want them to succeed, and we've put that mandate out there. Therefore, keep advertising. I don't know if $50 million is the right number, if $30 million gets it done, if $70 million is what's required. But think about now the image that General Motors has to recreate and the amount that it's going to cost to do that. We need them to succeed. Advertise. I agree with the advertising spending.
The biggest problem they're having is to advertise and convince people that they're wrong when they don't want the government to own the company. A month ago when they filed for bankruptcy, 67% of the people thought it was the wrong move for the government to be backing GM. A month later, it's now 80% of the people want the government out of this. Most of that advertising is to convince people they're wrong about their government being involved in GM. I don't see how it can win with advertising. What they're losing, every dollar of their tax money that goes into it, they less and less like the situation.
I don't know the details behind what advertising is what.
Yeah, but Jerry, do people in this country have a small attention span, small memory? I mean, are they going to forget that whole process, or are they so angry that no matter how much you advertise, they're not going to get people into a GM?
For deals. People are going to be looking for deals. They're all hurting financially right now. Everyone, and you're in competition with foreign companies. Make me a deal. Instead of spending the money on advertising, how about this? We put it towards the cars themselves and give that in the fashion to people. You know, when we say that, we own 60% of GM, it's not we. We don't own it. The government owns it, and that doesn't get me a dividend. That doesn't get me a write-off on any money I've made of loss. So I think that's a misnomer. You know, we don't own it. GM still owns it, and their shareholders own it.
Yeah, that is such a good point, Jerry.
Yeah.
I get emails of people getting fired up about
really upsetting.
Citigroup and the compensation. They're like, Alexis, I don't think I have a stock certificate at home that says I own Citigroup.
Where's
or
my
I own
upside?
GM. Yeah, good point. All right, guys, thank you very much. Great conversation.
Thank you.
John, thanks for joining us by phone. Coming up, we're going to go live to Houston, Texas for accused Ponzi